But the core message of this plan was that in 1987, they already said, we are going to demilitarize every nation east of Israel. They're both sinister plans. They both obviously will mean that we concede our Muslim land. We concede, essentially, in the end, Al-Aqsa, because that will be on the table to say that it no longer belongs to the Muslims. Really, Israel surrendered. They had to stop. They had to come to the negotiation table. They had to call daddy and then say, do these big bombs, almost let's bring it to a close because we can't continue this tit for tat. Our population will go crazy. They've been in bunkers too long. They're already fighting each other in the bunkers. This is where there's a lot of confusion around the US plan and the Israeli plan. Which plan are we seeing at the moment today? Are we seeing the Israeli plan, the Greater Israel, or are we seeing the American plan, which is normalization, two-state solution? And then the last nation, obviously, is Pakistan. Even in this last 12-day war, have you not seen how much rhetoric came out from Israel against Pakistan as well? Because they were trying to remind everyone that actually we're still not happy. We still have this slight niggle in the back of our head that we don't like that Pakistan have got nuclear weapons.
And we can see what happened at Glastonbury live on BBC. Just that one scene was worth paying the BBC license fee, you know what I mean? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to the Muslim Podcaster Show. I'm your host Majid, and today I'm joined by my guest, Brother Kam from Votu. Assalamu alaikum, brother, and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair for the invite. I was going to start off with the Glastonbury chant, but
yeah, bro. I think we wanted this to get published and not get banned straight away.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. But
targeted right away.
But we can get into that. Maybe you can drop it at the end or something. You know what I mean? Just so at least people can get some of the podcast.
Yeah.
But how you doing anyway? You good?
Alhamdulillah, all good. Yeah, good. Today's probably one of the hottest days, isn't it? Since this summer probably. So we're trying not to sweat like crazy right now in this call.
Yeah, bro. It has been hot, and it just shows the nature of man, bro. We complain if it's cold, we complain if it's hot. But you know what? For me, to be honest with you, one of the things you kind of reflect on is you think, it's hot, you feel sweaty, but at least we got electricity, we got fans,
exactly.
we got all these things, alhamdulillah. And you look at other places around the world, where a large part of the world, but even if you want to hone into Gaza, for example, it's hot there also, bro. And people are living in tents with no water, no food. It's just
you can't. Yeah.
No, I don't think we can say we know how it feels. We don't know. We don't know how it feels. It's like a parallel universe, bro. It's like something out of science fiction for us, But may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for all those who are suffering, oppressed. Ameen to that. But yeah, bro, listen, let's get inshallah to the podcast. Today, hopefully we're going to be discussing loads of things. And that's why I got you on cam, because when it comes down to the topics like Abraham Accords and Greater Middle East Initiative and all these sort of initiatives and think tank plans that are made, alhamdulillah, you're on the pulse, as they say. But bro, listen, if we look at the situation now, if we look at the recent conflict in the Middle East, right, which supposedly began on October the 7th for most Westerners, 2023. But bro, since then, loads has happened, right? If you think about it. So just think about Gaza. Gaza has been flattened, right? According to people like the Lancet, you're talking possibly 300,000 people that have been killed in Gaza, if not more. We've seen Lebanon being bombed. We've seen Hezbollah being seriously weakened. We've seen people like Hassan Nasrallah and also the Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh being assassinated. And even we've seen the Zionists have taken land from Lebanon and they're still there. Yeah. We also see how in Syria, we saw the fall of Assad. We saw the sort of takeover by once aligned to ISIS and Al-Qaeda Mohammed al-Jolani, HTS, we've seen them take over. And then we've seen the Zionists take advantage of this and take more land from Syria. They already had the Golden Heights. They've taken more land. They've even taken strategic places like Mount Hermon, right?
Mm.
And they, reportedly destroyed about 80% of
Mm.
Syria's military capability. Okay, we've seen Yemen being bombed. We've seen the events in West Bank. I mean, they've never stopped anyway, but we've seen since October the 7th, 2023, this has escalated, in a huge manner. And
Mm.
even in the last maybe 6 months or so, if not a little longer, we've seen how they've cut off places in the West Bank. They've totally destroyed refugee camps, um, and made tens of thousands of people homeless. And this is
Mm.
not in Gaza. This is in the West Bank. And then, bringing it to your more recent times, we've had the so-called 12-day war. I was going to say year war, but the Zionists wouldn't last 12 months. So
No.
it's factually, it's 12, so-called 12-day war between Iran and the Zionist state. So bro, to me anyway, that's a crazy amount of activity in just under 2 years, right?
Mm.
So, to kick things off and to sort of get your views and the sort of first question to you, do you think all these events that I mentioned, and there may be more that I've forgotten and you can sort of touch upon them, do you think they've come out of the blue, or do you think they have been planned? Are we looking at random chaos, or are these part of some elaborate master plan? What's your
Mm.
thoughts, Cam?
So it's a really interesting question because with these sort of events, it feels like they come out of the blue. They sort of haphazard their reactions to events. So October that happened, just somehow, the resistance managed to get in and cause the damage that they did, and then it's also spun from that. Obviously, there's lots of things that have happened before that, and we know obviously the history of going back to 1946 and all sorts. So I'm not going to go into any of that, but I want to really hone in on this idea that actually ideological nations, they plan 50 to 100 years in advance. And it's not, and a lot of people think, oh, maybe they do, but maybe it's secret. We don't know about it. It's conspiracy. But in fact, a lot of this information is actually publicly available. The reason for that is a lot of these people that plan, like they call them political scientists, essentially. Every nation has it. China have got them. America have got them. British have got them. Right? Every nation has them. But when it comes to ideological political scientists, they generally live amongst those ideological nations, like the likes of America at the moment. Just go back to one of the heavyweights of the US. He's not even an American. I think he's Polish. Brzezinski. Can't remember where he's from actually. Be good to find out. But he's definitely not American. He's not, as in he's not a native. Obviously, he's not British. As we would say,
I was going to say none of them are really
none of them are American, are they? They're either British, but at best. Zbigniew Brzezinski. He's a political scientist. He's now died. He actually passed away not too long ago, a couple of years back. I can remember seeing the news on it. He wrote a book called The Grand Chessboard, right? This we're talking 30, 40 years ago, right? In this book, well, prior to 9/11, this is way before. This is before we even know that they've got any interest in the Middle East. This is the time of, when they were still at war with the communists. They were already planning from those days that the conflict or the arena will be in the Middle East. And then it will move on to China. So they've already said in the next 20, 30 years, the conflict will be in the Middle East. And then in the next 50 years, it'll be in China or Russia and things like this. And you wonder, how have they made that prediction from so far back?
So this was in that book?
It was in the book, yeah. So the Grand Chessboard mentions that the Middle East is a catalyst for Islamic revival, basically, in our words, in our terms. They call it, various other terms. At the time, they didn't really talk about Islamism as a thing or anything like that. They just talk about it as the Arabs basically are potentially will reunite, and we need to stop their reunification. And you read, and I'm sure people at the time when they read these books, they probably didn't take much from it. They probably just thought it's quite a far-fetching thing to. They're so focused in what's happening now, they can't think about there's going to be boots on the ground in the Middle East. But then you've got the likes of Henry Kissinger in his books. You've got the likes of various other political scientists in the US. A lot of them have now passed away. They're they're generally quite old. These were the Cold War political scientists, as they call them, because this was back then. Obviously, there's new ones now, and it's worth knowing who they are. And they're the ones that live in that work for Brookings Institute, the Rand. They work for the Washington Institute. These think tanks have now evolved into the olden days, which were just purely a couple of figures of political scientists, sort of evolved slightly. A lot of these plans, if you look at them back then and now you look at them today, just reflect on them, they are so accurate in how they've detailed what's going to happen in the next 50 years, right? I want to talk quickly about this. There's one plan that a lot of people don't know about. It's called the Oded Yinon Plan, 1987, right? This was green lighted by the CIA, by the Mossad at the time. It's just this politician came, obviously he didn't come up with it on his own. There was obviously a lot of work gone into this whole plan. But the core message of this plan was that in 1987, they already said, we are going to demilitarize every nation east of Israel, right? So if you look at the map, northeast, you've got Lebanon, demilitarized. Hezbollah, we just mentioned at the start, Hezbollah has been decimated. That was one of the Israeli plans at the time.
But even from a military point of view,
yeah,
the Lebanese army is pretty useless.
Useless, yeah, useless, exactly. And if they do, and part of what we'll go into later, Abraham Shield, is that the Israelis are the ones who equip the new Lebanese army, so they can control exactly what sort of capabilities they've got. But anyway, that's what we'll go into later. But east of Israel, you've got obviously Jordan, who you've got the leader there that's completely in bed with the Israelis anyway, so they've got no issues with that. And if there was any issue, they would also be a threat to Israel. But as we know, they're not a threat at the moment because of their collusion with the Israelis. They are pretty much the first line of defense for Israel, and that's why we saw them shooting down all the bombs, and people saying crazy figures like 40% or something like that have been shot down by Jordan itself, and it's just absolutely disgusting. You've got Syria. What did we see when al-Shara came in, Jolani? One of his preconditions is that if he wants power, allow Israel to completely. He had S-400s. These are one of the most advanced air defense systems that Russia have got today. That's why America is struggling so much with the Russia-Ukraine war, because these S-400s completely take out anything that tries to hit their soil, right? Syria had like 4 of them. Assad bought them really early on. If they wanted to defend their homeland, they could have easily defended it from Israeli attacks. Just how Iran did quite well in this last 12-day war, as they call it. The fact they allowed them to take out those S-400s, then take out, or like you say, 80 to 90% of their military arsenal, that's long range ballistic missiles, intercontinentals, things like this, again, was a collusion, definitely a collusion there to say, okay, if you want power, great, you can have power, but here's your trajectory, here's how you need to work towards normalization. We'll give you power in that case, but we also want to make sure you're demilitarized in the sense that we know exactly what you're building going forward, and you can't hold on to the Russian arsenal that you've got already. Then you've got Iraq. We know from after the Iraq war, Iraq has been completely decimated. That's been fractured, fragmented, never really stood up again since then. Afghanistan, been in war for such a long time. Obviously, Taliban are in now, and they also, with so many sanctions and things like that, they can't really get off their feet. They haven't got much capability to do much other than defend themselves on the land. If anyone were to come into the highlands there on feet, that's when they can actually defend themselves, because they're great at warfare in their mountains and stuff. But from a state to state perspective, they will be they're not a threat. Iran was the biggest threat to them east of Israel. So this is all part of what I'm saying, the Oded Yinon Plan. In 1987, they already planned that if they want to survive there, they are basically telling the Americans, this is a plan by the Israelis, by Mossad, to say to the Americans, okay, we're happy to be your forward military base, but we want you to ensure our existence here. We want to ensure that we are the most powerful nation in this entire area. Nobody else has military arsenal like we have. And then we'll stick to the plan with what you've got for us. Basically, we're happy then. And then the last nation, obviously, is Pakistan. And they've, even in this last 12-day war, have you not seen how much rhetoric came out from Israel against Pakistan as well at that time? Because they were trying to remind everyone that actually we're still not happy. We still have this slight niggle in the back of our head that we don't like that Pakistan have got nuclear weapons.
Recently I was just reading some articles where it was talking about how Mossad actually they regret not taking out the founder of the bomb. And basically what they're saying is, we should have taken him out, before he got to this level, the stage of making the bomb for Pakistan.
I read those. That really good article, and to be honest, there's so much credit needs to be given to him for getting out and giving a Muslim country that knowledge to be able to, maybe this will be key in the future, that we need a nuclear power still amongst the Muslim countries, to have at least some sort of deterrence, if the Muslims were to ever unite.
So going back to the Oded Yinon Plan, right?
Yeah.
So did it specify the actual countries?
It did. Yeah, it did. It specified the countries. Actually, the map of the Oded Yinon Plan map is very similar to the Greater Israel map. So if you ever see the Greater Israel, when there's pictures of the Knesset in Israel, there's this picture a lot of people have seen. There's the map, and it's Israel, but it's expanded. How are they getting away with it? As you can see, Saudi is all taken over, and Iran, Iraq, all of this has been expanded into Syria, obviously. So these are very early plans. Okay, they've changed and morphed. There's a lot of stuff in that obviously didn't happen today, because this is way before even America got involved in Iraq and things like that. But you can read between the lines. You can read it and you can say, okay, I know exactly what the Israelis want from a standpoint of how they want. They feel threatened. They've been given this bit of land. They've been told, you need to be our intelligence agency, essentially, in this Middle East, our forward military base. And then their response is, okay, we'll do that, but you have to ensure our protection, and this is our conditions. So then they had internal plans and started to say, okay, we present this back to you, and the Americans will probably negotiate and say, you can't have that. We need some good cop, bad cop thing going on over here. So we're not going to completely take out Iran for a while, because we don't trust what you're going to do if there is no threat there for you, if you see what I mean. So the point really is that we sit here thinking things happen just out of the blue. But if you look back at some of these plans, why are they so accurate? Yeah, why are they so thought out, to the point that they mention countries, they mention exact details on what they don't really like about those countries. So it was mentioning things like Syria having so much military arsenal. It was mentioning things like Saddam at the time and things like that, and Iraq having nuclear. And so it mentions all of these things in detail. Obviously, it's not always right. This is the thing with political analysis. It's not always going to be, nobody can foretell the future, obviously. Only Allah knows. But the point is, these things don't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen out of the ordinary. These things are planned. These things are put into 50 to 100-year plans for America, especially, so that they can maintain that hegemony over the world, and not just the Middle East. We need to remember this is a lot. The game is a lot bigger. Obviously, Islam is one of the biggest threats to them from an ideological perspective. Definitely the biggest threat, but from like an economic perspective and a military perspective, they do have other threats like China from an economy perspective, Russia from a military perspective because they've always wanted to be a military power. So this is the point. And I think we need to really start becoming more well read. I think a lot of Muslims don't know about these plans. They don't know, and then when things like the Abraham Shield and the Abraham Accords come along, they think again it's something new. It's some sort of new negotiation, but really, again, this is just adaptations of what they already have said they wanted from a long time back. So we can be prepared. We can be prepared for what they're going to ask us of, and we can essentially see the game and be able to change the course of the history by tackling it that way.
So, subhanAllah, you mentioned, I mean, I'm sure there's more plans other than the Oded Yinon Plan. Obviously, we have the Greater Middle East Initiative as well. But just a quick question for you then. So there's been a lot of discussion in terms of Netanyahu years ago talking about 6 countries or 7 countries that he wants destroyed. I mean, this is probably an extension of the Oded Yinon Plan.
Yeah, it's the same countries, yeah.
It mentions some other countries as well, like Libya, for example, right? But what people are talking about is that somehow you have America who is somehow semi-innocent in all of this because it's American presidents getting duped by Netanyahu to fight Netanyahu and Israel's wars, right? Now, if someone sees the Oded Yinon Plan, they might think, okay, so this plan was put together by a Israeli Zionist, right? So maybe there is some truth in the fact that it's actually Israel that is dominating and using the Americans, and they're just going along like silly people who don't have their own will, right?
Yeah.
Some people might say that.
Yeah.
But the fact that I want to just touch on one quick point and get your opinion is you mentioned something. You said even with these plans like the Oded Yinon Plan, right? It was the British, but later on, just say the Americans, who use this piece of area that's occupied as a forward base, right? So even if there was a plan like the Oded Yinon Plan, which is saying, look, for us to get away with and do what you want us to do, we need to basically deal with the Palestinian issue, close that file. We need to weaken everybody so we dominate the region, so we exist. So in order to do what you want of us. So if you look at it in that way, it's in America's strategic interest to have this forward base. So for this forward base to be able to exist and to dominate and do what's in the interest of America, then ultimately it leads back to the White House, right?
Yeah.
Some people can't see that.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's really good. It's a really good point. And this is where there's a lot of confusion around the US plan and the Israeli plan. Almost, it's quite hard to see because at times they're together, times they're at odds. Which plan are we seeing at the moment today? Are we seeing the Israeli plan, the Greater Israel, or are we seeing the American plan, which is normalization, 2-state solution, that sort of thing? And this can get very confusing for a lot of people. But
are we saying basically that maybe the objective is the same, as in it's in both of their interests?
Yeah.
But how they want to execute the plans, they differ on those type of policies.
Exactly that. And I think the difference is the Zionists are a lot more zealots, right wing, think they're a bit too arrogant. They think they can get away with obviously murder. And the Americans are ideological. They're saying, we'll support you as much as we can, but there's sort of red lines. We know when we know we've got our eyes and ears in the whole of the Middle East. We know when enough is enough. We know when you've gone too far and you're going to basically you're going to regret it, and we're not going to be able to help you.
Yeah.
So look at just the Iran war, the 12-day war. Literally, they were out of missiles in the next 48 hours to protect themselves. They had to really, Israel surrendered. They had to stop. They had to come to the negotiation table. They had to call Big Daddy, as NATO has been calling Trump recently, Daddy. They had to call Daddy and then say, do these big bombs, almost let's bring it to a close, because we can't continue this tit for tat. Our population will go crazy. They've been in bunkers too long. They're already fighting each other in the bunkers. They would not be able to sustain it. And America reminded them of that in this. What people don't realize, if you look at the wording, Trump even said, let them have a punch up. It's almost good for them. It's good for the Israelis to realize they are not invincible. Let them have a punch up. They're going a bit too far. They're trying to rope us in with these attacks. Iran actually put forward a plan where the Zionists were trying to create a false flag in America to blame Iran, to pull America into a war with Iran. This was foiled by Iranian intelligence, and they let the Americans know, by the way, go capture these guys. These guys are planning to do a terror attack. They're going to blame us. The CIA went and caught them. And actually, it was true. They were about to do a false flag.
Wow.
So America needed this to happen as well. Even though he's saying God bless Israel and God bless America and all this stuff, almost Israel and America are like, one and the same. There was a lot of messaging in there that showed that actually they aren't always on the same page when it comes to what America want them to be in the Middle East, or they're on the same page in terms of they both know why they're there, but America have a different way of managing it because they're ideological and they've also got more intelligence.
But I think also there could be an element where, if you look at what America's been doing, because America, they have the biggest blood on their hands. People don't understand. They've killed millions of people. I'm not forget the Native Americans. It's just since September 11th.
Yeah.
Millions of Muslims have died directly and indirectly from their wars, right?
Yeah.
But it almost seems like they are doing what they need to save the Zionists from actually suicide.
Yeah.
And I think, you mentioned that the Americans are ideological, is because I think with the Zionists, I mean, you just need to open up Surah Baqarah of the Quran, and you can see what these people are like, what Musa alayhi Islam had to endure, right? So it's almost like because of the arrogance, because of this plan about the greater Israel, God's chosen people, everyone else is Gentiles, and
the third temple, all that stuff.
Sometimes and we see that the society has shifted to the far right, like your Smotrich and your Ben Gvir. They're not seen as these weird guys anymore. These guys have really important positions now in government, right?
Yeah.
So it almost seems like America is saving it, reminding it that, look, without us, you won't survive. But then they'll still do things, which is to kind of push the boundaries. For example, the Greater Middle East Initiative, not not the Greater Middle East Initiative. I was thinking more about the Greater Israel Plan, right? Because that kind of looks like it goes against what the Americans would like. I don't know if it does, because long term, if it serves their strategic interest, then I don't think they care whether
That's the point.
Israel takes over parts of the Sinai and Saudi. They don't really care.
No.
But you know what? Just to bring in something very important, and this is something which is critical, I think, because we saw as soon as the 12-day war ended, right? Trump came out, tweeted about peace, and they've been talking about this normalization, Abraham Accords, non-stop. Yesterday, I think I was watching an interview where this American politician was talking about basically they've got people queuing to normalize with the Zionist state, and not just, and they also said, and hint, hint, some countries that you would never have imagined, right?
Yeah.
So, what about the Abraham Accords? And obviously they kind of relaunched it as the new Abraham Alliance, right?
Mm.
Um, Maybe we could talk a bit about A, what is the Abraham Accords, or secondly, is the new Abraham Alliance, is it the same or is it any different? And what and bro, what's the danger of this?
Yeah. So I think first it's important to know this idea in politics, in diplomacy, that gets applied all over in all walks of life, not just politics. When you're negotiating with someone and they want X, Y, Z, and the negotiations aren't going anywhere, the only way you can really get back to X, Y, and Z is if you take them all the way to A, B, C. You go over here, almost like, when you're bartering, you start so high or so low that you meet in the middle.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Right, it's the same concept, but they do that in politics as well, when it comes to political negotiations and things like that. For many years, obviously, the resistance have said no. We want all of our land back. We want to go even beyond that. Even a lot of them, obviously, later on, they were sort of wanted to agree to 1967, get West Bank back. This whole war is essentially that. This war has basically decimated Gaza to the point that anything now is better than before. So they've took him, as they call it, a feet away, and then now it's easier to ask for an inch. Whereas before, when you was asking for an inch, they were saying no, no, no. So there's a term for it in political power play. But anyway, that's the main idea behind it. It's a bit like bartering. This is what we can see what's happened with Abraham Accords and now Abraham Alliance, is that the Abraham Accords was good at getting sort of the fringe Muslim countries involved and getting their OKs, that's fine. But when it came to the big countries that they want to basically green light it, like the Saudis, they were not getting very far. They weren't getting anywhere. So that Abraham Accords really wasn't in its initial state, it wasn't actually that successful. Yeah, it wasn't significant. It wasn't successful because they didn't all unanimously normalize, obviously, because they were saying, well, you need to sort out this issue of the Palestinian state, essentially, before we come to the table. Now, what America, and this is why there's been so much support from the US for Israel to go off and do this entire war, is because they said, okay, let's do that thing where we go all out and then we'll come back to the table at the end, and then you'll probably concede more than you would have conceded before. So the Abraham Accords is a much more diplomatic solution. There was nothing to do with military containment of Iran. There was nothing to do with demilitarization of the resistance. It was purely to talk to the Muslim countries and say, recognize us. Israelis are saying this. And
actually, just on that point, yeah. Even the initial Abraham Accords, there wasn't even any concessions that the Zionists had to make, was it? Linked to Palestine. No. Those countries just recognized.
Yeah. Without, yeah. Right, exactly. And now this new, and they're still calling it Abraham Accords. That's why it's very confusing. Trump still calls it that on his tweets, because he's trying to take. Obviously, he wants the credit because he initially came up with Abraham Accords. So he's still using the term Abraham Accords. But if you look at the Israelis, they are not. They're calling it the Abraham's Alliance or the Abraham Shield. What this is a much more. Obviously, they're both sinister plans. They both obviously will mean that we concede our Muslim land. We concede essentially in the end Al-Aqsa, because that will be on the table to say that it no longer belongs to the Muslims, and it will either be internationalized or there's some sort of sharing agreement with Israel officially of this land. West Bank will be officially most of it handed over to Israeli ownership. So this is what's included in the new Abraham Shield, which wasn't originally included in the Abraham Accords. So Abraham Accords didn't actually mention anything to do with occupied territory in West Bank. So this new Abraham Shield is a lot more thought through, based on the war that's happened now, based on Iran being completely contained, based on Lebanon being demilitarized, based on Syria being demilitarized, based on Iraq being demilitarized, based on basically decimating the resistance so there's no resistance left. And that's why they call it actually not a diplomacy, they call it a military containment plan. It's more like it's a military plan. There's a lot more military talk. There's a lot more, we're going to have our armies here. The Muslim army, the Muslim Arabs armies are going to be in Gaza, basically, essentially being the safeguards of Gaza. But really, as we know, they will never be safeguards of the Muslims, because they didn't do anything while this genocide was happening. Why will they do anything now? They'll just skip. If there's anything happens, they'll be out of there in no time. So it's a lot more sinister plan, and it's being termed Abraham Accord still, but actually the detail, it's all on the website. If anyone wants to know the details behind the Abraham Shield, Abraham Alliance, just go to the website. The website details in so much detail. It's a bit strange they go into that much detail, and it's almost like boasting the detail.
So does it have any information on who's involved in this? Who's behind this?
Yeah, it does. There's actually a page called "Who Are We," and on there you think, oh, they'll just be probably the heads, CEOs, or something of this plan. There's about 500 images of people, and all of the people that are on there are the movers and shakers of society. All the capitalists, the CEO of Google, the CEO of Wix, the CEO of different organizations, Waze. You think, what are they to do? These are basically means that the movers and shakers, the rich ultra billionaires, are all on board with this. The CEO, obviously, not CEO, the head of Mossad, head of Shin Bet, head of all of the intelligence agencies. These are the deep state that have all this time been for the war in Gaza, and for almost right wing, and like almost they were happy for Israel to take all this land. But then why are they all of a sudden shifted away and said, okay, no, let's normalize? Because the whole idea was, we're going to move all the way this part, we're going to destroy the land so much, and we've always got a plan to come back to the middle. The right wing, like Smotrich and Ben Gvir, they're being used. They've been used by the actual Israeli deep state and the American deep state, because they needed people like that to take the fall. Netanyahu, Smotrich, Ben Gvir, they're going to be like the Mladiches of the future. They're going to go to trial. It's all going to be pinned on them.
So, a couple of quick questions then.
Yeah.
Firstly, with the detail you're talking about, it sounds like this plan hasn't been put together in the last week or so, and especially with these 500 people who are so high ranking in their own fields, right?
Exactly.
It sounds like this has been on the table for a long time. My second question is, so are we saying that the Abraham Accords was basically an American initiative, but the new Abrahamic Alliance, or Abraham Alliance, the Abraham Shield, is actually from the Israelis themselves?
Yeah, that's right. So Abraham Accords was obviously penned in Washington. Abraham Alliance is them saying, we agree with the concept of normalization. We want normalization, but you're unrealistic. We need military here. We need military there. We need to control most of West Bank. We need to officially have West Bank, so it's not called occupied territories anymore. So they've come out and said, no, we're not going to play ball until you concede all of these things for us.
But that don't make sense, bro. That don't make sense in the sense that, is America happy with this? And B, so, if you look at the Saudis, and some of the carrot that's being dangled to them, for example, they wanted their own NATO style agreement with the Americans of defense and stuff like this, and they weren't even really bothered about the Palestinian issue. But obviously, with the people on the ground, they don't want to just accept normalization without there being anything, any good happening for the Palestinians, right? But if this is purely being pushed by the Zionists, before you can argue, oh, America is seen as a peacekeeper. You have Trump, he's the ultimate businessman, the deal maker. and he will entice the Americans to be able, sorry, the Saudis to normalize
Mm.
because there's incentives from America to them.
Yeah.
But if this is purely driven by the Zionists, I mean, I'm not saying
Wait,
that these
no, no,
countries wouldn't accept, but I can't see how. I don't know. I
no,
can't
no.
see how they would
Yeah,
accept.
you're right in that sense. We need to realize that these plans, it's not going to go into exact plan how they've detailed they want it. This is them saying this is what we want.
Hmm.
So Americans have said they support it. They say, okay, we support these plans, but there will definitely be things on there that they've extended too much. They've said they're basically taking it too far, like
They've gone too
the
far.
likes of Syria, where they're saying we're not going to pull out basically from what we've taken. Um,
But I thought
Americans,
recently I was reading that Syria is ready to normalize, even though you
yeah,
might have seen today there's a hashtag going around where people are totally against it in Syria.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
there were talk about Syria normalizing, and they were gonna be the Zionists would move out of the areas that they took, also with Mount Hermon as well, a strategic place, which I doubt very much they'd
But
ever
not the
move from
Golan
there,
Heights.
and not the Golden Heights though, yeah.
Yeah,
But this other plan that you're talking about now, it seems like it's kind of in contradiction to that, where they're not going to move out.
yeah, and that's it. And this is where we'll see what happens in the future, what they concede. But there's obviously interest from the deep state in Israel that actually we do want Mount Hermon and things like this. So we don't know. We'll see what happens. But I think obviously there'll be things in the plan that won't go to how they said it in that website, how they've detailed it. But what we need to realize is that these plans, these 500 movers and shakers in society, don't just pop out of nowhere in the last week or two on billboards with a web link on it. The fact these
Yeah.
guys must have been planning this for years to get these sort of people in the same room and to plan this sort of high level detailed plan on every single country around them as well. It's not just talking about Palestine here. They're talking about Lebanon in this plan. They're talking about Syria. They're talking about Iraq. They're talking about Iran. These plans they've
Like
probably
what, for example? What have they said? You
so
mentioned something at the beginning about Lebanon, and you said we'll come back to it. So
um
you said, I think you were saying something like they want to be able to, they want to be the ones who supply.
yes, yeah. So it mentions that they will rearm the Lebanese army once they've completely been sure that Hezbollah does no longer exist in Lebanon. I.e., they either they have their intelligence agencies on the ground there, um, and they purely buy Israeli goods, or I don't know how that works, but basically they want to know they want to arm the Lebanese army,
Hmm.
and you know what that means. That means there'll just be very minimal arms and nothing to threatening them. So there'll be no nuclear um, sort of build up there. They won't be making any nuclear sites or enriching uranium or anything like that, like Iran have done.
Did they mention anything about Masjid al-Aqsa?
No, that's the bit I was looking for because I wanted to see what they're saying about that, and I think that's probably intentional because that is probably the most sticking point in obviously if they did mention anything like we were going to take over Alexa or internationalize it or something like that, I think it would probably get too much limelight put onto it. I think definitely they probably kept that a bit blurry. It was more to do with military containment. How are they going to? How this is how we feel safe. Essentially, we need to make sure Lebanon's army we're arming them. We need to make sure Iran have no nuclear weapons or no nuclear enriching uranium at all going forward. We need to
Hmm.
make sure Iraq again, the resistance in Iraq is completely killed off, and it's so the Abraham Accords is very diplomatic, all about coming to the table and negotiating. This plan is all about if you do something, we are going to kill you. That is, if you read the line, if you read it, it says, if you do it, we Israel have the right to destroy you. Basically, that's the language they use in this because they weren't happy with the language of the Abraham Accords. It was too washy. It was too airy fairy. It was too like, oh, we'll come to the table and discuss it. Now that they've had all this
Hmm.
success, basically, or as they call it, success, just going off and killing and doing as
Bro,
much damage as they can.
the new Middle East, innit? They said
Yeah,
they were going to redraw
redraw. Yeah,
the Middle East. So in terms of two questions. So when now the Americans or Trump and stuff like when they're talking about normalization and they're talking about Abraham Accords, are they actually talking about the new Abraham alliance? And secondly, very quickly, if this new Abraham alliance or this Abraham shield was successful, what would the Middle East look like?
They are talking about the Abraham alliance, but it may not come into complete fruition
Like
as
when
the
the
Israelis
Americans
see
are
it.
talking about it, that's what they're
Yes.
talking about.
Yeah, definitely. They are, because they are talking about now Al Sharaa being a part of the normalization deal. What's his name? Is it Joseph Aoun in Lebanon or
Yeah,
Michael
just like
Aoun? Yeah, people like that. So yeah, it's definitely the same thing. They're talking about the same thing, but it's purposefully kept quite um, muddy, and you can't really understand between the lines until someone actually details it. But what was your other question? Sorry.
the question was is that if they execute the
Oh,
this
okay. What would it
plan
look like?
as they would like, which
Yeah,
is a
yeah,
bit
yeah,
far
yeah,
fetched,
yeah.
what would the Middle East look like?
It would be, firstly, it would be in line with, it would actually be in line. This is why the Americans probably are not too against it. It would be in line with the GMEI. It would mean a new complete regime in Iran, a new secular puppet style, Sharia style government, which is going to essentially come in and say, "Oh, take off the sanctions. We'll do this. We'll do that. We've not got any military capability anymore. Complete disarmament of Iran, a bit like Syria. So this is what they want for Iran,
Libya.
Libya, exactly. Um, there'll be essentially no threat to them all the way up until the borders of Pakistan. So everything east all the way to Afghanistan is basically disarmed, and then obviously we know also to the west you've got the likes of Egypt and Libya and those guys. It doesn't mention Egypt much, I assume, because he's already in line with the American agenda anyway, CC. But it, I don't. I think we need to remember. There's one thing that we need to remember is when you're thinking about this stuff ideological. I don't think that's realistic. I don't think that will happen because Israeli society needs a threat. They need something to bond around. They are a fake society full of fake people, all from different walks of life, different countries, all been thrown into here. And the only cause that they've got that as joint cause is this idea that they are under threat. They are going to be bombed. The Muslims hate them. The Muslims want to kill them. This is the one thing that unites them as a nation. As soon as that threat goes, they are complete at odds with each other, fighting each other. And you can even see this even during the war. They had issues with the Orthodox Jews not wanting to join the war, and then they were literally going to completely take over cause the government to collapse over this issue. So imagine if there is no war, what is the level of? So the Americans ideologically know that they need this threat, and Iran was actually that perfect threat because they were never going to actually destroy Israel. They were being contained already by America. America had already intelligence to see how much in uranium they're enriching and all that kind of stuff. So, in my mind, I don't think it'll ever get to the point where there'll be complete no threat in that area for them, because again, it will just mean they'll self implode, and America realizes that from it. But the Jews don't. The Jews think that they need they're almost wanting everything, aren't they? This is the
Yeah,
nature of them.
but I don't think they would know where to stop. I mean, they've done stuff in the past which is crazy. When they bombed that American Navy ship
Yes.
and stuff like this. It's
Mm.
like that's not what normal people do.
No.
You know what I mean? Um, but uh, but yeah, I think this is important for Muslims to really be clued up on these matters because the
Yeah.
implications are great.
Yeah.
Um, so, bro, Cam, what should we expect in the next few weeks or months or so? With the because situation in Gaza is going from bad to worse.
Mm.
That's got to come to an end at some point. They are talking about some sort of ceasefire.
Yeah.
I really like the point you made about, if they're not giving you an inch, then go back a length,
Boston. Yeah.
and then an inch isn't as difficult to give than it once was
Mm.
because they have no choice.
Mm.
Um, and I think they already did this before, if you think about it, where you had all of Palestine occupied,
Yeah.
then you had people calling for, okay, we'll accept 67.
Yeah.
So they changed, didn't they? They changed
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
goalpost. They changed it from all
They
of
did,
Palestine to
moving the goalpost.
67, right? And
You're
they've
right.
been always moving it because the more they take, you think, actually, you know what? If we had accepted it last time, we would have probably had more than we got today. It's
Yes,
the carrot
and
dangling tactic, isn't
that's
it?
exactly why West Bank there's been a massive expansion really quickly because they're thinking before we go to the table, let's quickly take as much as we can, and
Yeah,
then we'll
yeah,
say,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
we'll concede another 20%.
Bro, these guys are the experts on changing the reality on the ground.
Yeah.
You change it because really, you know, when they talk about two states, even if somebody wanted two states, the reality on the ground doesn't dictate that. But anyway, going back to my
Yeah.
question, bro, is what should we expect in the next few weeks and months?
So the very interesting thing to keep an eye out on, and this will be very interesting because do you know if you look at then this to do with Netanyahu's trial, Netanyahu was always center mid politician. He was never right wing when he first started. He was not fully right. He was right, probably center right. You would say he obviously was right wing enough to kill the one of the. They say he was behind the murder of what's his name, Yitzhak Rabin, wasn't he? Because
Mhm.
he went to the table, negotiation table, whatever. But anyway, he was always a bit extreme, but he was never the level of Smotrich and Ben Gavir's type of right
Well,
wing.
there's two things in it. Quickly, point is
Yeah.
Netanyahu is secular.
Yes.
Those guys are
Those
religious.
those are
Different.
those are religious fanatics. Yeah. Yeah. And Netanyahu is always seen as a secular. But yeah, you're right. He's had to move his position because the Israeli society has moved that way. The Israeli society has been in the last 10, 15 years purposefully brainwashed. If you look at the level of media and what the sort of thoughts and they carry, they're complete alien to the rest of the world. They think complete different. Look at the guy that just smashed the little child onto the floor randomly. It's almost like he had this urge that he couldn't fight. He saw a child, it's a Muslim child, and he can't help himself but
But I think
kill
he
it.
was Christian, you know? Was he?
Was he?
I think he was Christian.
Apparently, that'd be even more strange. But I don't know. But they were saying that he was obviously from Israel, wasn't it? Even if he was Christian,
I think he was from Belarus, you know?
was he?
I think so.
I don't know.
But anyway,
But
it doesn't take away the fact
either
that,
way, yeah. Either way, the
bro,
society,
listen, I'll give you an example
yeah,
where, you know, like, just say on a Joe Rogan podcast,
yeah,
where you got two guys talking about if I had a button today, I would nuke Gaza.
yeah, yeah,
Imagine that's the equivalent of Joe Rogan podcast in
yeah, yeah,
America
yeah,
to the like a really top podcast
yeah.
in Israel occupy Palestine, and that's what they're talking about.
That's the level of thought there. Um, so the point is that this Netanyahu had to move to that in order to firstly save his political career, and now obviously with his trial going on, the only way he can stay out of jail is stay in power and also stay in war. The fact that the Americans have potentially said we're going to get you a pardon, Trump is trying his best to get this trial overturned. It's a witch hunt, all that stuff. Basically, what they did to him, what they did to Trump, and he had to get do all whatever he did to get rid of all of that. He's basically trying to do the same favor for Netanyahu, but that doesn't come at. That's not just because he likes Netanyahu. That's going to be purely because he's going to mandate that Netanyahu comes back onto the American agenda, which is a slightly more extreme version of the Abraham Accords. Okay, don't go as watered down as Abraham Accords. We like your Abraham Shield, but maybe not all of it. But that's better than you going down this right-wing agenda to completely take over Gaza, take over West Bank, take over the Sinai Desert, take over Saudi. You're going to cause a war, and we're going to lose you as an asset in that region, right? Ideologically. So they're saying, okay, let's give them, let's pull them back to the American agenda, even if it's slightly different to how it was originally. So that's what we need to look into. We need to find out if this happens, if his trial is dropped. It's most likely because he's now being told to fall in line with the American agenda. And that's when you will see more of this Abraham Shield come into play. I don't think this Abraham Shield and things will come into play if the trial goes ahead and Netanyahu still goes, gets attacked and goes
A
to jail.
point that to make just came to our mind is one of the risks that Netanyahu has,
Yeah.
and he has had, is if those people like Smotrich and Ben Gvir, they leave his government collapses,
Yeah.
and then he's put in jail. Now imagine that jail threat is no longer there.
Mm.
And then since the 12-day war with Iran, if you if it's true, the reports are that this guy's, popularity is
Yep. The
sky
polls.
high, right?
Yeah.
So then you call for quick elections,
Mm.
right?
Yep.
Without having the threat that I have to form a coalition with these far right people, because the
Yeah.
reality is that I don't think people like Ben Gavir and Smotrich would accept anything less than the Great Middle East.
No.
Sorry,
Exactly.
great. Keep saying
Great.
Great Middle East,
Greater Israel.
Great Israel Plan,
Yeah.
and their constituency,
Yeah.
which is
That's their
massive,
call. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
right? So you'd have to remove them from the government,
Yeah.
right? Maybe even get some war crimes on them or something like that, and go down the Mladic and the Mladic route. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? And
Yeah.
take them to the
Take them
Hague
to
or
the
something.
Hague. Yeah.
Um,
You're right.
but yeah, just a thought on what you're
Yeah.
saying.
And this is it. So this is what I'm saying. So it really depends on how much the right wing essentially curtail this plan. If the right wing curtail it by continuing the war with Iran, they do something, escalate it, or they go down the route of ethnic cleansing in Gaza and try and get the Muslims to either killing them off through starvation, or they try and ship them off into Somaliland or wherever these plans that they've got, the right wing have got. These sort of plans, if they come into fruition, that will really topple the Abraham Shield plan.
Good question. The
Yeah.
Abraham Shields plan, what does it do for Gaza?
In Gaza, it's being administered by the Arab countries. So they've got their armies in it, Saudi, Qatar.
But
They
the
have
Palestinians are still there.
Palestinians are still there. That's why it's still, so
Yeah.
it's not a right wing plan.
Yeah,
It's the right wing would hate that.
They would never accept that.
They will never accept it. That's why it's so shocking that all of these billboards came up. Netanyahu's talking about it, and Trump's talking about it, because this suddenly switched up. And then at the same time, it mentions, "Oh, we're also going to support you and try and get this trial removed." So isn't that convenient that America is supporting them of getting this trial removed, and then Netanyahu's bringing out the Abraham Shield plan, which says Gazans can stay. You see what I mean? It's completely at odds with the right wing that are saying, no, we want all of it. So, but really now there's going to be definitely we need to watch out for the next couple of months, this back and forth between right wing Zionism trying to escalate it and America trying to conclude it. So Trump's trying to conclude it with this Abraham Shield, which is a bit more he's given to the Israelis, which he didn't want to give. In his, if we didn't mention yet, Trump when in his first term he had a policy paper written called Trump's Peace Plan to Prosperity.
The deal of the century.
Deal of the century, yeah. It was penned by Brookings and Rand. I can't remember which one now. I think it was Brookings actually. Yeah, it's Brookings. And that is it's actually quite similar to the Abraham Shield. It just doesn't give them as much as Abraham Shield is wanting, like recognition of the West Bank being Israeli and stuff like that.
The Middle East is changed since then.
That's what I mean. Since then,
they're in a position of power now.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why this plan came about. It's like the Israelis saying, "Look, we've changed the condition on the ground now. It's all about the reality on the ground. After the military, basically intervention, now we need a new plan that really reflects this, of Iran being weakened, Hezbollah being weakened, Syria being now under the whole under American influence, all that kind of stuff." So again, the whole point of this, I think, this podcast is to tell the people listening that these plans don't come out of thin air. These wars and these actions, these such big events don't come out of thin air. These are pre-planned. These are part of reshaping the Middle East. They've talked about it a long time ago. They see it as a threat. There's different perspectives. There's the American perspective, which is ideological. Then there's the Zionist and Israeli perspective. And if we know about these, then we can work out what is actually going on, what is happening, where can we stop, where can we change the course of history. I think this is the main point. Is imagine if all the Muslims knew what the plan is. If they knew that this new Zionist plan is to do with essentially, in the end, demilitarizing the entire resistance, not a single resistance in the entire area, going from Palestine all the way to like the Pakistan on one end, and then going all the way to Africa on the other end. There's nobody in that entire region that can threaten them. these are if this goes ahead, then when it comes to Al-Aqsa, who's going to defend it?
Subhanallah, bro. But one final question.
Yeah,
Um, just say we now have this information. Can we, as an ummah, change the course of history if we know their plans?
definitely, most definitely, because who are who's in control of our lands? It's these dictators. It's these leaders and their very minority followers. But like, look at Assad. That's a prime example of how easy, really, it was to get rid of someone that's been entrenched there for so long. Okay, Gilani might have had a bit of support militarily, but the will of the people that were fighting, they were there just to get rid of Assad. They weren't thinking too long term. They weren't thinking who's provided some sort of air support here and who's if they didn't even have any of that, they probably still would have done the same thing because they were ready to die to go and liberate Syria. Because these leaders are there, they've been implanted there. So look at the likes of King Abdullah. You've got if Jordan realized, if the Muslims in Jordan realized what his level of treachery and that this is all going ahead, all in the end to then take over Al-Aqsa and build their third temple and all that stuff and appease the Israelis and give them whatever they want, because they'll go as far as they can go until it gets too much. Then if everyone had that foresight, they would actually think, okay, these are the blockers. These are the people that are stopping us from changing this. That's when they'll start resisting against the regime. That's when things will change. I think the problem is a lot of us, we're in this rut of life. We're getting on with things. We've got families to feed. We think we're doing our bit, which is just our ibadah and things like that. Obviously, we're all frustrated. There's no organization. However, with this, we always say with knowledge comes power, essentially, because if you know what the plans are, you can actually defend against it. If you don't know what's going to happen, how are you ever going to prepare for it? It's impossible.
Yeah, exactly, bro. Subhanallah.
But yeah, I definitely think it's possible if we know about these plans. These leaders are fragile. They're very fragile, especially at this time.
At the end of the day, to know the plans is better not to know them.
Yeah.
You understand? So at the end of the day, you can probably do something about it. You can generate awareness, like you mentioned about the leadership amongst the masses, expose them. If you think about the Oded Yinon Plan, actually, you know what? I would say that includes Jordan being demilitarized. So
yes, it does. Yeah, it does. Yeah, they want that in the end. That will, and so if they knew that,
but but the thing is, they need to understand that the guys in charge are just in it for their throne.
Yeah,
and to be honest,
they're on borrowed time,
bro. And they're on borrowed time. But to be honest with you, bro, when you think about the treachery of these rulers, right? If you look at rulers from the past, who were also placed there by the West, by the Kuffar, right? But when it came to Palestine and these issues, bros, they still had, and this is funny, odd even saying this, they still had a standard.
Yeah.
What you're seeing now is you're seeing this normalization going through, these leaders queuing up to recognize Israel, not getting anything back for it, not getting any two-state solution or anything for. Actually, they're doing it whilst a real live 4K genocide is going on. Right?
Baffling.
It's baffling, but it just goes to show that, you know what, alhamdulillah, one thing is for sure, bro. It's good. We need to. It's not good. We must know about the plots and plans of the enemies of the kuffar. But secondly, alhamdulillah, one thing I would say is that these plans that the Abraham Accords or the Abraham Alliance, Abraham Shield, these are at a very artificial level on the top. Even if these rulers accept these, right? The people on the ground will not accept it. However, what you got to understand is even they know this. So what you would see is the leaders acknowledging, accepting, right? Then what would happen is they would oppress those people really severely who speak out, in the hope that give it a generation or two, everything will be normalized, as they would like to call it, right? Because currently, bro, the people on the ground, they will not accept this. But the more people that know about these plans, they understand that, you know what? Today it might be Syria, tomorrow it's going to be Jordan, it's going to be Tunisia, it's going to be Algeria, it's going to be Pakistan, it's going to be Indonesia, Malaysia. Bro, they would never stop.
Mm.
They would never stop. And even with this plan about to the east of the of occupied Palestine, right? Bro, if they achieve that, they wouldn't stop. They
No,
would go west, they would go north, they would go south,
exactly.
right?
Mm.
And if we don't do anything about this, or don't speak about this, or take time out to learn about this, then when it's us next,
Yeah,
we're gonna have no one to blame, bro.
exactly.
You know?
That's it. That's the main point, definitely. And I think the danger of that is that it will take us even longer as an ummah to unite and have any sort of deterrence or power or military to be able to reestablish anything,
Yeah.
because we will be completely decimated in terms of military power,
Yeah.
in
Why
terms of
wait?
economy. Why? Yeah,
Why wait to get destroyed? And I'll give you a
yeah,
quick example of this, bro, and then
exactly.
we can probably bring the podcast to a close after your final thoughts. Is that just think about this: when the attack happened on October the 7th, right? Hezbollah in Lebanon started firing some missiles, but it was restricted to just say a certain area. And it was also very reserved, like we're not going to go beyond this because we don't want heavy
Yeah,
repercussions our way. But what did the Zionists do? They destroyed basically Gaza to a certain extent, weakened the resistance there. Then they made that ceasefire.
mm.
The same day, bro, they pointed their guns and they decimated Lebanon and they weakened Hezbollah, right? And then what happened? Then they went for Iran. Now
Mm.
imagine this. Imagine if all these factions had coordinated
Yeah,
and worked together.
yeah,
Do you think they would? Do you think the Zionists would have survived? They would not have survived a week, bro.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, imagine.
Unless
Yeah,
obviously Big Daddy came on the scene,
yeah,
right? But the point I'm saying is everyone is just waiting. Everyone's reluctant to do something because
yeah,
they don't want anything to happen to them. But you know what, bro?
yeah,
This is like a broken record. It is gonna happen to you because it's
yeah.
happened to so many others before you.
Exactly. Yeah. This is it. And this is why the knowledge is key, isn't it? It's the knowledge that knowing this is going to happen, is knowledge being sure that you know what they are like, you know that they've planned this. So why not hit them before they hit us, and make sure basically what we say is they talk about this grand chessboard. We're talking about flip the chessboard, flip it on its head. Don't
Yeah,
let them carry on their game.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
trying to carry on their little chess. Oh, you go here, I'll go here. You go here, I'll go here.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Flip the chessboard. No, we're not going to let you do that. We're gonna unite. We're gonna attack you for the next 3 months constantly until we deplete you, and then
We're gonna stop the oil. We're
we're
gonna
gonna stop the Straits of
close all
Hormuz.
these
Yep,
your Suez Canal and Strait of
Hormuz.
Hormuz, and
Yeah,
they didn't even have to fight.
exactly. They don't need to. They don't need to. Something like, was it 60 to 80% of oil passes through there? Will
Yeah,
completely ruin capitalism overnight.
subhanallah, bro. But listen, I just want to get your
Yeah.
final thoughts, bro, and then because it's my front room is changing to a sauna right now, so I want to just get your final thoughts, inshallah. We can
Inshallah.
get the
No, no,
podcast
inshallah.
to a
I think
close.
I think the main point of getting on today is that we need to be a bit more well read as an ummah. We need to look at the plans. It's all detailed. They are so arrogant enough to put this detail out rather than keeping it under lock and key. The fact that it's all out there in these books, a lot of these political scientists, they are proud that they wrote what's going to happen in the next 50 to 100 years. So they release books and they make money off it. But a lot of the Muslims don't read it. We don't read it. We don't realize what's actually happening. When we read it informationally, not like almost like an ideological plan for the future. So we need to do that, and we need to look at some of the plans. We need to look at it in detail. But also, I think the main thing is understand the camps, knowing that there's an ideological camp and knowing there's a Zionist camp in this case will really start clarifying in your mind, what is this? What's going on? How does it add up? What's going to happen in the future? Why is it they're talking about Abraham alliance, but then they're carrying on attacking Iran? Who's doing this? If they want
Yeah.
to come back to if they want to come to the table, why are they attacking? It doesn't make sense. So once you've started to read up on these things, then you see, okay, I know what's going on, and then that's when you can start telling the Muslims around you, talking to people. You don't realize how quickly this stuff spreads, this knowledge spreads, and these thoughts spread. And then they could spread to the right places. They could spread to the places like Jordan, like we're saying, where they will then revolt against the leader. They will stop those missiles. If ever another attack hits Israel, if the people were aware that their country was defending Israel to this level, then you think a lot of the Muslims wouldn't be out there bloody protesting against the army to say, put your guns down, let it go over. All that many millions of Muslims is because we are purposely kept of this information. You have to dig for it to find it. But we really need to make the ummah more aware and more read.
Yeah, subhanallah, bro. Jazakallah khair for that. And it's like our beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the believer is not stung from the same hole twice. So
Exactly.
this is very important that we understand and not be stung continuously over and over again by the same plots and plans. And look, reality is like you're saying, bro, knowledge is power. And even though we've talked about how things are not looking so great, and especially if this plan goes through, the Abraham Alliance plan, things won't be looking good. But at the same time, I think there's been a seismic shift in terms of the world perception of capitalism, of the Western civilization, the true face of the Zionists, the true face of the West, the hypocrisy, the double standards. You know, we see this, and we can see what happened at Glastonbury. Um, Live on BBC.
Yeah.
Just one scene was worth paying the BBC license fee. You know what I mean? But the point is there is a movement out there for change
Yeah.
in the Muslim world, and also there's voices of dissent within the non-Muslim world as well. To be a like on the fence whilst
Bystander.
this happens,
Mm.
it's not an option for a believer. It's not an option, and we must do what we can, and what's in our capability. And one thing that certainly is to read and learn. And what I will do, inshallah, I will post some good links, especially the one from the Abraham Alliance one,
Yeah.
in the description, so people can go in and read for themselves. But bro, Cam, Jazakallah khair on this
Jazakallah khair.
very stuffy, warm evening. You took some time out, and I really benefited from, the thoughts that you meant, that the thoughts and the information that you gave, and I'm sure everyone listening would have too. And please, I always request, let us know what you think. Drop a comment, whether you agree, disagree. We might have got it wrong, and just give your thoughts. Inshallah, dialogue is good. It can,
Inshallah.
help us all improve and refine our ideas and understanding of events. Um, so yeah, inshallah, until the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.